It works! Yay! I haven't played this in such a long time. Hi, I'm Holly and I'm going to talk to you about some hacks for making your first video game. I'm so surprised. My first sort of memory of playing games was my first console, which was a Nintendo DS Lite. It was a little pink one. And the first game I got was Nintendogs. And I didn't realise that actually this was my first step into cozy games and games that are non-violent, low stress, and just all about escapism. My dogs are probably dead now, unfortunately. Animal Crossing New Horizons. So I played this a lot during the pandemic, and it was a way for me to have a routine, but escape and feel safe. That's sort of how my story progressed into figuring out that I wanted to make heartfelt, wholesome, narrative-based games. One of the talks that I watched a couple of years ago that really helped me in my journey with game development was from Camposanto, who made Firewatch. They talked about pinpointing, which is such a crucial point of level design, which I've taken away with me. So in my game that I've just released, Morgan Metal Detective, I didn't want the player to have to keep referring to their map to find out where they were. So we would use different landmarks in the environment, such as a lighthouse, the harbour, the church, so that players could orient themselves in the world and they could feel more immersed. So that's one of my biggest takeaways from their video. There are many different ways that you can start to put your ideas together for games. One of the things I really like to start with is a paper prototype. So this is a really great way of starting and thinking about game ideas where you can fail really quickly, but test it very, very quickly as well. Take inspiration from anything. You can take inspiration from games, from art, from films. And once you know what you want your game to look like, that's when you go in and start experimenting. With my initial brainstorming phase, I sketch out everything, so cutscenes, characters, maps of the space, and sometimes this does correlate into what it will eventually look like. Something I really like to play around with is style. So mixing 2D with 3D environments and characters is really fun. There's so many different things you can play around with. Never mind, we'll try that again. You don't have to be a professional writer to write your scripts. As long as you have an idea and you know what you want the characters to be, you can run with that and implement that into your game. Within games, you can have branching narrative. So we sort of describe this as a tree, and you start on one path and you have many different options. Depending on what path you take, that will take you to different outcomes. And this can get really confusing when you're making the game. There are different softwares available online to help you plan these trees. I use Inkle, which is a free online resource. It helps you input the text and then translate that into a language that the game engine can then use in the dialogue system. Playtesting a game from the very beginning is absolutely key. It's really useful watching people play your game because players will play it in ways you wouldn't have even imagined. And then they can give you feedback on what they liked, what they didn't like. Then you can perfect that, work on that, and get it feeling better. This is what we call grey boxing. With my game, Morgan Metal Detective, I would build the island in Unity in the game engine, and it would be completely grey, it would look horrible. But what I would do is I'd walk around it to see how long it would take me to walk around, if this was fun for players, and then if it wasn't, I would flatten it, start again, and then retest it. Getting people on board early to tell you this is fun, this isn't fun, is really important. Then you can move on to making it look nice. Once you're past the grey boxing stage and you move into the design, this is when you start to create mood boards and research about where you want to actually set your game. My game was set in Cornwall, so I spent a lot of time on Google Earth walking around the streets in Cornwall, finding places that worked, and then I made a patchwork of all of these different places together in my game. Reaching under the table. The early stages of games design for me looks like different scenes within the game engine. So they're either called scenes or levels, where you build the world, you have your character controller, and you build the mechanics into that. So when you hit play, you're in that world and you start playing it. So I have my trusty little laptop that I take with me absolutely everywhere. It's covered with all of my favourite stickers. At the moment I'm using Unreal Engine 5 and I've decided to use this as an indie developer because I'm not a programmer and I find the blueprints to be much easier to use for me as a visual learner. So blueprints is a type of visual scripting where you use nodes rather than writing code. And I find that easier to build and iterate upon following YouTube tutorials. And it's also free. I took a little while away from Unreal Engine to learn a different game engine called Unity. Once you understand the language for one game engine, it's quite transferable between all of them. Another really accessible program is Blender, which is also free. You can 3D model, you can animate, you can texture, you can actually export what you've created in there and import it into the game engines. So then you can run around and implement the game mechanics. When I'm designing characters or environments in Blender, I find that an easy win can be actually following tutorials. A really classic example of Blender tutorials is the donut. So we've all started there learning how to make a donut in Blender and making something that's not necessarily related to my game, but helps me learn the fundamentals and learn how to use the software so that I can implement those skills to make what I need. Every other word. In the game development process, we tend to have 4 different stages. So you start in alpha, which is where you implement the fundamental game mechanics and get that working. Then in beta, that's where you start to refine the game mechanics. You play test that, make sure that it is fun, that players know what to do in the game, and then you can add things like characters, environment design, and make things look pretty. Then once that's all locked down, you finally move into gold, and this stage is purely about testing. We play test regularly, find out what's working, what isn't, if there are any bugs. So bugs are things that aren't working or break the game, and these will be things that need fixing ASAP. Then once that's all done, you can finally move into the launch. So we use the term polish a lot in game development. This would be where we're testing things regularly, adding refinement and making the game feel whole. If you wanted a DIY approach to getting voice acting in your game, you can record straight off of your phone and then cut the audio into different clips of what you want the sentences to be. From there, you just upload that onto your computer and into the game engine. And then when you play the game and you interact with the characters, you'll have your dialogue. The point that you know that it's ready to be launched is when you don't have any game-breaking bugs and players are happy with the mechanics and having fun, which is sort of a subjective place to work out where you are. But as long as you've done enough testing, you know when you're ready. Yeah. Oh, I just don't want to be wrong, that's all. I always have my little trusty notebook, which is just full of things that I need to get done in the day, especially when I'm prototyping and I'm trying to script. Sometimes it feels like a really big challenge to create something large, but actually when you break it down into the individual points, it's much easier to get through and it makes a lot more sense in your head. A really good place to start with making games is game jams, and these are short little competitions, sometimes 24 hours, sometimes a couple of days long, and you work with people that you meet online in Discord communities to make small little games based on different themes. You can find a lot of these on itch.io. There's a whole calendar of game jams that happen throughout the year. This is where I first started making games. So you can absolutely make a game with zero budget. There are so many free online resources. We've talked about the game engines, which are Unreal Engine 5 is free online, has an asset store with loads of free assets on there. There are also lots of other different websites like Sketchfab and TurboSquid, which have free models on them, so you don't even have to build the models. Use your initiative and bring in all of these different things to make your game. One of my top tips and sort of my hack for being in the games industry and making games is connecting with other people that are making games. The community and the industry is incredibly friendly. All of the lanyards from game events that I've been to, which is a lot, all of these were so useful. One of the events I'd 100% recommend is Develop Brighton. This happens in July every year and you can get free tickets. You don't necessarily have to do this if it puts you out of your comfort zone. So meeting people on online events can be an alternative way to making these connections instead. But as I found myself going to more events, my confidence grew. So I've gone from being an introvert to an extroverted introvert, which is how I like to describe myself now. The first one went so well. A piece of advice that's really stuck with me is start small, which sounds really simple, but is so incredibly important. Finishing something is more important and having that on your portfolio than creating a big, complicated game. So start small and finish it, and that's the way to go.